May these words be spoken and heard in the power of that love which draws all to the Christ. Many of you, of course, would remember the Beatles from the 60s and 70s. I remember coming down to Melbourne to the festival hall and being one of the screaming crowd. You could hardly hear the music, mind you, for the screams of 14 and 15-year-old young girls. But it was a great concert. And then, of course, there was the great crowd that gathered outside the hotel that was up there in Exhibition Street, since been demolished. One of their famous songs, written by John Lennon and credited to Lennon-McCartney, was All You Need Is Love. It was first performed by the Beatles on Our World program, the first ever global live TV link. Broadcast to 26 countries and watched by 350 million people. The program was broadcast via satellite on the 25th of June 1967. The BBC had commissioned the Beatles to write a song for the United Kingdom's contribution, and this was the result. It is among the most famous songs performed by the Beatles, and the Rolling Stone magazine ranked it in the 362nd best song of all time. Asked to come up with a song containing a simple message that would be understood by viewers of all nationalities, Lennon's All You Need Is Love extended the message that he had first tried to put across in The Word from the Beatles' 1965 album called Rubber Soul. Their manager at the time, Brian Epstein, commented, "The nice thing about the song is that it can't be misinterpreted. It is a clear message saying that love is everything." But the question, is love enough? Robert Browning, of course, the poet, knew how to stimulate love and growth in people. His undying love for Elizabeth Barrett was proof of this. Elizabeth Barrett endured hell on earth during her young formative years. She was one of 11 children and grew up under the siege of an oppressive, dictatorial, controlling father. His angry rages during her childhood forced the frail Elizabeth to be frequently confined to bed with an accumulation of ills. And this was the saga of her life until she was 40 years old. And then she met Robert Browning. He didn't see Elizabeth as a sickly, middle-aged invalid. He saw her as a beautiful, talented spirit waiting to blossom. He loved her with all his heart and gave her an irresistible invitation to accept his gift of love and become all that she was capable of becoming. Robert Browning had brutal confrontations with her father, and they eventually married, not the father, but Elizabeth. Glowing in their love for each other, they travelled throughout Europe, drinking in the wonders of the various countries that they visited. And at 43, Elizabeth had her first child, and blossoming in her life for Robert, she was able to produce such works as the sonnets from the Portuguese, which many of you would be familiar with. One of the lines, "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. How do I love thee? I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach." Dr. Carl Menninger, who with his brother set up a sanatorium for the mentally ill in 1925 in Topeka, Kansas, said this: "Love is the medicine for the sickness of humankind. We can live if we have love." Erich Fromm wrote an interesting book in 1956 called The Art of Loving. He was born in Frankfurt, Germany in 1900. He had a very unhappy childhood. His businessman father was very moody, and his mother was frequently depressed. He went on to university and received his PhD from the Heidelberg University in 1922 and began his career as a psychotherapist. In his book, The Art of Loving, he asked the question, is love an art? Is love an art? If it is, then it requires knowledge and effort. Or is love a pleasant sensation which to experience is a matter of chance if you're lucky? Can you fall in love at first sight? Well, it sure saves a lot of time. It means you don't have to go to eHarmony and suffer the innumerable coffees as you trawl through each other's memories trying to find a point of common interest so that you can make another date. But if we are to believe modern music and movies, then we're starved for it. On Netflix, you can watch dozens of movies about happy and unhappy love stories, and we can listen to countless songs about love, and yet we hardly think that there is anything to be learned about love. So, Fromm presents love as a skill that can be learned, taught, and developed, rejecting the idea of loving as something magical and mysterious that cannot be analysed or explained. He would find the concept of love struck as being alien to his concept of love. And Fromm argues that because modern humans are alienated from each other and nature, we seek refuge from our alienation and loneliness in romantic love and trying to find a partner. He says that real love is not a sentiment which can easily be indulged in by anyone. It is only through developing one's total personality to the capacity of loving one's neighbour with true humility, courage, faith, and discipline that one attains the capacity to experience true love. So one cannot fall in love, really, one has to be in love. And that means that loving becomes, and the ability to love becomes one of the most important things in our life. Fromm also argues that the character of true love involves 4 basic points or elements. The first one, he suggests, is care for oneself and for others. We see that love implies care when we see a mother's love for her child. No assurance of her love would strike us as sincere if we saw her lacking in care for her child. Love is the active concern for the life and the growth of that which we love. And where this active concern is lacking, there is no love. Care and concern imply another aspect of love, the second one, and that is of responsibility. Responsibility is often meant to denote duty, something imposed upon us from outside. But responsibility in its true sense is an entirely voluntary act. It is my response to the needs expressed or unexpressed of another human being. And responsibility could easily deteriorate into domination or possessiveness if it were not for the third aspect of love, which is respect. Respect is not fear and awe of a person. Its roots comes from the Latin word rispecere, which means to look at. The ability to see a person as they really are. And if I love the other person, I will feel one with him or her, but with them as they are, not as I want them to be. So respect thus implies the absence of exploitation. To respect a person then brings us to the fourth element of love, which is knowledge. To respect a person is not possible without knowing that person. Knowledge would be empty if it were not motivated by concern. And so there are many layers of knowledge, but the knowledge that applies to love is the one which does not stay at the periphery of things, but penetrates to the very core of the other person. It is only possible when I can transcend the concern and worrying about myself and see the other person in their own terms. One of the readings that is applicable to this theme are from the words of Jesus put in his mouth by Matthew. And in both the Gospel of Matthew, written many decades after the death of Jesus, and in John's Gospel, written in the last decade of the 1st century or early 2nd century, Matthew's Gospel, we have a religious leader coming to Jesus, and Matthew says he's a lawyer, and he asks a question. Funny about that. Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest? And Jesus' reply was, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbour as yourself. It's interesting to note that Fromm in his book says that love is not primarily a relationship to a specific person. He states that love is an orientation of our life and character, which determines the relatedness of a person to the world as a whole, and not towards one object of love. If a person loves only one person and is indifferent to the rest of humanity, their love is not love, but a symbiotic attachment. So I think this is what Jesus is trying to say about loving our neighbour. What the religious leaders were wanting Jesus to do, like all the religious leaders of Jesus' day, was to make a ruling. Come on, Jesus, give us a rule, give us a law, and then we'll be right. Just like all the other 640 rules that are contained in the Jewish faith. Come on, Jesus, give us a ruling. And what did he do? Well, Jesus didn't say at the heart and centre of your faith you should go to church or synagogue. He didn't say you should read the scriptures. He didn't say you should pray. He didn't say you should go on a pilgrimage to a holy place. He didn't say make sure you put your pledge in the offering plate every Sunday. Jesus ignored the very centre of their religious life, and he said, love God and your neighbour as yourself. What did he mean? He was indicating that love is at the very heart of our faith. The very heart of our faith. And it means being alert to the depth dimension of our lives. And in John's Gospel, written by a later tradition, the writer puts these words into the mouth of Jesus. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. It was Dr. Martin Luther King who once wrote, love is the most durable power in the world. And in some ways, this four-letter word seems radical in our current climate of our world. For love refuses to kneel at the altar of self-interest and fear. It refuses to be seduced by all the things that diminish us in our lives. And when you consider the political discourse in our country at the moment, it seems that our politicians are encouraging us to be careless and engage less. For hate is a dead end for our souls and for our society, and let them run the country as they see fit. They encourage us to be angry that we have a safety net for the poor and the dispossessed, to be angry at refugees who have risked their lives seeking a better life in our fair land, to be afraid to go out at night to visit our favourite restaurant. Yet it is love that we must turn to in times of hate. And it might sound old-fashioned to think so, but showing love for one another and leading with love is everything. Love inspires while hate consumes us. Love uplifts us. It is the scaffolding of our humanity. Love sees all of us as being worthwhile, as having a place in the table of equality, community, and possibility. So love is a positive force or attraction that holds the whole universe together. When love is present, everything is worthwhile. So love is that positive force or attraction. When love is absent, everything falls apart. Love has a lot to do with our overall well-being and can be likened to a drug that heals the mind and body. And people who are in love are less likely to become ill. So the health workers tell us. And when you feel loved, nurtured, cared for, supported, and intimate, you are much more likely to be happier and healthier. Nothing heals better than love. Many older people die soon after they've lost their lifelong partner. They die of a broken heart. And studies show that love does indeed improve our health. Dr. Dean Ornish of Yale University conducted a study of patients undergoing coronary angiography. Those who felt the most loved and supported had fewer blockages in their heart arteries than the other patients. So, finally, there are three parts then to love. Love is acceptance of myself. Love is acceptance of other people in all of their diversity. Love is allowing others to accept us. One evening, just before the great Broadway musical star Mary Martin was to go on stage for the musical South Pacific, a note was handed to her. It was from Oscar Hammerstein, who at that moment was on his deathbed. And the short note simply said, "Dear Mary, a bell's not a bell until you ring it. A song's not a song until you sing it. Love in your heart is not put there to stay. Love isn't love until you give it away." May we all leave this place today determined to give our love away. And our blessing. God, our keeper and our companion, it is our thought that whatever joys or sorrows the future may hold for us, you will be the dawn for which we wait and look, the hope by which we live, the joy for which we long, and that you will be our freedom now and forever. Amen.